If you're new to woodworking, you're probably real close to buying your first table saw, or you may be looking to upgrade to your next table saw if you've already bought one. Well, YouTube can be kind of confusing for the beginner woodworker because you can see a lot of really high-end table saws with a lot of really fancy accessories, and you don't really know what to buy. So in this video, I'm going to address 5 different things that I wish I knew when I was buying my first table saw, and we'll get into it. My first piece of advice is this: the blade. Get a good blade. And you're probably asking yourself, what is a good blade? Well, most likely it's not the one that came with your saw. It's probably a 24 tooth blade and used for construction. Real toothy looking thing, throw it out. I hate those things. They give really horrible cuts. And for most woodworking, they're useless. They're mainly for construction, and I don't even think I've used it for construction. So get a good blade, a good fine cut blade. This is a 60 tooth blade. It gets a really nice cut. It's still pretty quick. You know, the more teeth you have, the slower the cut's going to be. So, but it's not going to cut too slow. And I think a 60 tooth blade for most woodworking is good. You could probably go up. I would err on going with more teeth than less teeth, because at least with the more teeth, you'll get a really good cut. But the trade-off may be you have to feed the wood a little slower. So get a good blade, first thing. My second piece of advice: there's a lot of different accessories that you'll need for your table saw, like push sticks and feather boards and all that. And there's a lot of things online that you can buy that are molded plastic, push sticks, all sorts of fancy push blocks and gadgets that adjust and all that. My advice is don't buy it. Don't buy those things, because you can make them. And the reason why you want to make them, like this push stick, is because with that piece of plastic push block that you just bought for 30 bucks, you may have a piece of wood that you're ripping into a real thin section, and you might have to put this through your blade to push it through. Like if you're ripping, a 1/4 of an inch or so. Well, you can push, this is a homemade block, and you can push this thing through the blade and not worry about it. In fact, I have, you can see. So you want to make these out of scrap wood. Push blocks like this thing here, push sticks, and even feather boards. Feather boards are, I see them for 30 to 40, 50, 60 bucks on Amazon. And this is something that is so easy to make on the table saw that you don't want to buy one of these things. You just want to make it out of scrap wood for many different reasons. You can use that money elsewhere. That's $30, $40, $50 worth of wood that you can buy. Well, if you just make it out of scrap wood like this one, you don't mind it if it accidentally hits your blade and gets messed up and you have to throw it away. You're not throwing away a lot of money. You're just throwing away scraps of wood. This stuff is easy to make. Don't buy it. The third thing is buy what you can. Buy the table saw you can afford, and don't get too much of one. Don't get to thinking that to be a really good woodworker, I have to have a $3,000 to $5,000 cabinet maker saw and spend all your money on that. You don't really need it. Probably one of the best all-around saws out there is a good contractor's saw. Get one from Grizzly, Jet, or what have you. My saw is basically a grown-up contractor's saw. It's an old jet super saw, and I'm not sure that they make them anymore, but it's really just a grown-up contractor's saw. A step below a cabinet maker's saw, or two or three steps below. But I've used this in production work for my art frame business, and it's been more than enough. I have fed hundreds and hundreds of feet of wood through this thing, oak, basswood, poplar, and it's been just fine. If it bogs down a little bit, then you just slow up the feed. Those big cabinet maker saws are really, really good in fast production shops. But for most woodworkers out there, you don't really need one. And you're just good with a good contractor's saw. What I would spend a little bit of money on is a good fence. You don't have to buy the best fence, but buy a good fence. And then also the rip capacity of the saw. Get as much as you can, because you'll want it. You know, mine is 20, oh, it goes out to 32 inches. So I got 32-inch rip capacity. And that's what you want for, you know, sheet goods, 4x8 sheets of plywood and stuff. So more so than a big beefy saw, you know, thousands of dollars on the saw, just get a good fence. You will get way more use out of the fence than you will the extra, you know, horsepower or so of the motor, or the, you know, the fancy cabinet or the paint job. Just get a good saw, and but go for a good fence. That's where your money is best spent. The fourth thing is to build one of these, a good outfeed table. This is one of your best accessories for a table saw, because you will need to cut down some long boards and some plywood. And if you have one of these, it makes it a whole lot easier than trying to balance it and get it onto a sawhorse, or have someone else hold it while you cut it. That's not good. So build one of these. And it doesn't have to be fancy. This one is just utility plywood, and I've painted on it, I've glued on it. It serves as a good all-around workshop table. I don't have to worry about, you know, killing the top, you know, a pretty wood top and messing it up. I don't have to worry about that with this. If it gets a little too much glue on it, I sand it. If it gets a lot more glue on it, I just take it up, pry it off, put a new piece of plywood on, and keep going. So build you a good outfeed table where it's just the same height as your table saw, or just a little bit lower, maybe an 1/8 inch lower, to where it doesn't bind when your wood gets pushed onto it. Sometimes that'll happen. So you want it just a little bit lower, because if it's a little bit higher, it'll catch that wood every time and it'll drive you nuts. So build you a good outfeed table. The fifth piece of advice is safety. The table saw is one of the most dangerous power tools in the wood shop. And I have seen more people, carpenters and cabinet makers, with table saw injuries than anything else. And I even have one. I ran my finger through the blade. But fortunately, I did what you should do, and what the beginner needs to know is to use this, the blade height adjustment. This adjusts the height of the blade, and you always want to crank that blade down to where it peaks up over the edge of the top surface of the wood about 1/4 inch. That's what saved my finger. I cranked the blade down. And if I had it cranked way above the wood, I would have lost a finger. So always, 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 unless it's extreme circumstances for a cut, crank the blade down to where it just barely breaks the surface of the wood, and just a little bit more, no more than 1/4 of an inch or so. And that's the most important thing I can tell you for a table saw. Crank that blade down. So there's the 5 pieces of advice I have for a beginner and their first table saw. These were things that I learned over time, and some things I learned just in time. And I find these very important, and I want to pass them along to you to help your woodworking journey along and to go a little bit smoother and safer. If you enjoyed this video, please like or subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.